Prevalent across each and every entry of A Song of Ice and Fire is the idea that the world is not so simple as good and evil. Good people can and do make bad decisions, even for good reasons, and bad people have their own moments of virtue. Yet, through the nature of the themes and the actions of the characters within, it is clear that A Song of Ice and Fire is focused heavily on the sins and shortcomings of humanity. Thus, there are many in the narrative who are wicked and evil. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Exploring Fiction. From wayward knights to roaming mercenaries to kings and queens on the Iron Throne itself, there are many who qualify for the title of worst individual in A Song of Ice and Fire. I thought it would make for an entertaining discussion, so I've compiled a list of a few contenders and will succinctly state each of their cases, in order to decide who is the worst character in A Song of Ice and Fire. So, who exactly are the worst people in the story of A Song of Ice and Fire? And who do I think holds claim to that unseemly title? Let's explore. Before we dive into the video, please note that this is for fun, and is meant to be a springboard for future discussion. Characters are listed in no particular order, and they only qualify if they are in the main series of A Song of Ice and Fire, being A Game of Thrones through A Dance with Dragons. Thank you. One obvious choice for the worst character in the story is the bastard of the Dreadfort himself, Ramsay Bolton. From his very conception, Ramsay's existence seemed destined for depravity. His father was a northern lord, but his mother was an unwilling lowborn woman whose husband was murdered on the whim of Roose Bolton. Ramsay's upbringing was tempered at best, and it was no wonder his adult demeanor was so vile. Ramsay tortured for sport, led hunts for captured maidens with his pack of rabid dogs, and butchered innocent lives without a sliver of remorse. He betrayed those who should be allies, and took what he wanted when he wanted it. From forcing Lady Danella Hornwood into marriage, only to let her starve to death in a tower just to inherit her lands, to skinning two young boys to conduct a grand ruse, to mutilating a prince of the Iron Islands for his own enjoyment, Ramsay Bolton committed many acts worthy of great scorn. But, are there others worse than he? Another contender in my mind for most despicable character in the world of Ice and Fire is none other than Ramsay's very victim, Theon Greyjoy. But before he was broken and reshaped as the blubbering, stinking reek, Theon was a snide and arrogant youth. Claimed as ward by Lord Eddard Stark, as punishment for the failed upstart Lord Balon Greyjoy's rebellion, Theon spent most of his life at Winterfell, developing a relationship akin to brotherhood with Robb Stark, and amiability with his siblings. However, Theon's base nature remained. He was always pompous and impulsive, but when Robb rode south for war, Theon was sent home as an ambassador. Instead, he returned a turncloak, capturing Winterfell with his band of Ironborn raiders. He betrayed the innocent people of the North, people who had done him no harm, and instead showed him only kindness all his life. The only way Theon could repay them was to supplant their acting lords and claim ownership of their home. What's worse, Theon took heed of Ramsay's advice, and permitted the man to flay two young boys, merely to make it appear as though he had killed Bran and Rickon Stark. Theon may have received his comeuppance, but it did not erase the deeds of his past. One surprising entry on the list of characters who are potentially the most evil is the Lord of Dragonstone and upstart king himself, Stannis Baratheon. While he is stern and cold, Stannis is hardly judged by many as evil, but one specific act propelled him into consideration among the worst of the worst. For with the aid of a seductive red priestess, Stannis called upon shadow magic to win him the largest army in the War of the Five Kings, and this incantation of the darkness resulted in the death of his own brother. Stannis willingly and actively sought the murder of his brother Renly. Though it haunted him almost immediately, he went through with his plan and got what he wanted. Most of Renly's forces joined Stannis' ranks. The Lord of Dragonstone called upon his hardened heart to allow himself to willingly end the life of his own brother, and on that faithful day outside Storm's End, he became a kinslayer. True, Stannis did not hold the knife that pierced Renly's heart, but the shadow that carried out the task was in his shape and likeness. For this unforgivable act alone, Stannis Baratheon deserves at least consideration amongst the most wicked. Another individual showered in infamy for one foul deed is the wizened, miserly Lord Walder Frey. Other nobles have turned up their noses at the Lord of the Crossing for his entire life, believing Walder and his Frey spawn hardly worthy of attention or respect. They are ruddy, grimy simpletons, with more offspring than any other house, but they can be useful. When Lord Tywin Lannister requires a lesser nobleman to carry out the task of extinguishing the king in the north, it is Lord Walder Frey who answers the call. He is the ideal candidate, as Robb Stark had spurned his oath with the Lord of the Twins, going back on his word to marry one of Walder's daughters. But as twisted as this may be, the late Lord Walder's retaliation is a scheme as surprising as it is vile. Walder orchestrates the Red Wedding, a masquerade of peace and friendship that quickly devolves into a bloody, cold-hearted massacre. Robb and Catelyn are not only murdered, but humiliated in death, and the Northmen that are not sent to the grave with their king are held hostage by the crown. Of course, Robb Stark breaking his oath cannot and should not be overlooked, but the manner and magnitude with which Walder Frey responds overshadows the young wolf's transgression. Until eternity, Lord Walder Frey and all his descendants will be remembered as the untrustworthy miscreants who violated guest right and conducted one of the largest mass killings in the history of Westeros. Some characters need little time to leave a lasting impact of disgust. Such an example lies in the form of Viserys Targaryen, older brother to Daenerys Stormborn. Viserys was quite young when his family was overthrown by the usurper and his allies, and so he spent most of his formative years in hiding and on the run. Viserys and Daenerys were robbed and cast out, forced to wander the free cities and court foreign tycoons in an effort to garner support for their planned counter-rebellion. By the time of the current narrative, Viserys has every reason to be as bitter and harsh as he is. But is this a viable reason to be so cruel? He, along with Magister Illyrio, plots to gift his own sister to the warlord Khal Drogo to win himself a Dothraki army to take back Westeros. And even then, he still desires his sister for himself. He physically and mentally abuses Daenerys, and parades about with a charade of the power he wishes he had. Viserys has suffered greatly, much due to circumstances out of his control, but instead of rising above it, he wallows in self-pity and scorn that brings out the worst of his personality. He teeters on the edge of madness, and dies, penniless, a continent away from his true home. Yet, the torment Viserys Targaryen afflicts upon his own sister is difficult to overlook. The Beggar King is not the only antagonist to Daenerys Targaryen who bears discussing, however, for even after the life of Viserys was snuffed out, a different individual took his place in crushing the will of the Mother of Dragons. This is Mirri Maz Duur, a magi of the Lazarene and bane of young Rhaego. After his defeat of Khal Ogo outside a Lazarene village, Khal Drogo permits his Khalasar to plunder and ravage the town and its residents as a reward for a battle well fought. As is the Dothraki way, no qualms are held about actions taken in the raid, except by their newest member, Khaleesi Daenerys Targaryen. When she comes upon Mirri Maz Duur being taken by some of Drogo's men, she halts their abusive actions. She saves the life and what dignity is left of the portly Magi woman, and accepts Mirri Maz Duur into her company. But as the Dothraki band continues on across the countryside, the wounds Khal Drogo suffered in the battle begin to sap his very essence. Mirri Maz Duur explains to Daenerys that she has studied the healing arts from masters across the entire known world, and attempts to heal Drogo. The great Khal, though, removes her bandages and reopens his wound, leading to him falling from his horse, and being declared unfit to rule. His condition worsens so greatly that Daenerys begs the Magi to practice blood magic to heal him. But Mirri conducts her ritual not for the benefit of the Khaleesi, but for herself. She returns Drogo to life, but as a shell of his former self, and in the process, destroys baby Rhaego in Daenerys' womb as she is giving birth. The Mother of Dragons burns the woman upon Drogo's funeral pyre for her misdeeds, but the damage is done. Daenerys merely tried to salvage Mirri from the death and desecration that awaited her, but the Lazarene woman repaid her with the incapacitation of her husband and the sapping of the life of the child in her belly. What the Dothraki did to Mirri Maz Duur was inhumane and detestable, but in revenge, she destroyed the once promising future of the innocent Khaleesi that attempted to show her kindness. Returning to an obvious choice for the worst individual in the world of ice and fire, the next character to highlight is the Mountain, Sir Gregor Clegane. Already an imposing figure due to his size and penchant for rage, Gregor gained the reputation for evil at an early age. As a child, he created the grizzled form of the Hound single-handedly, holding his brother Sandor's face over an open fire merely for playing with his toy. And during Robert's rebellion, it was Gregor who committed the worst atrocities of all during the sack of King's Landing, the killing of the Crown Prince's innocent wife and children. In the current story, the Mountain's actions are much the same. He kills without remorse, and ravages the mainland of Westeros like a vicious storm during the War of the Five Kings. He is the single most destructive force in Westeros, at least on an individual level, and his band of personal soldiers follows his example. Arya Stark witnesses their cruel methods of torture firsthand during her captivity at Harrenhal, and later even hears word that the Mountain dissects Vargo Hoat and feeds him flesh from his own body. Gregor Clegane is almost so despicable and unstoppable that he takes on the persona of a primordial evil, and he is only quelled through the poison and treachery of a man out for revenge. The final entry into this discussion of characters, who may be the worst of the worst in A Song of Ice and Fire, is one without which this list would be incomplete. The lioness herself, Cersei Lannister. Setting aside her incestuous relations with her own twin brother, Cersei still stands as one of the most contemptible people in the world, let alone Westeros. She cares only for herself and obtaining power for personal gain. Cersei seemingly orchestrates the death of her own husband, the king, and subsequently accumulates more and more authority in his absence. While it is true she cares for her children, they do not impede her hunt for power, especially after the death of her eldest boy Joffrey. She plots and schemes against ally and enemy alike, seeing hostility all around her. When Cersei believes Margaery Tyrell is prying the loyalty of King Tommen toward herself and away from his dearest mother, the Queen Regent sends the girl's brother to die in a vain campaign at Dragonstone, and constructs a plan to ruin House Tyrell forever. So ensconced in her own cunning does Cersei become, that she hastens her own downfall. While she is saved by a faceless knight and a corrupt maester, the amount of enemies she created through her wretched deeds and heartless commands has earned Cersei a worse reputation than some of the most repugnant warriors from the Wall to the Free Cities. A Song of Ice and Fire has no scarcity of reviled characters. In fact, this idea is one of the series' greatest selling points, that no character can be trusted because everyone has the capacity to do both good and evil. However, some characters stand above the rest in the halls of infamy due to their thoughts, words, and actions. While I have laid out the case for 8 such individuals, my personal pick for the worst person in the world of Ice and Fire is a tie between Ramsay Bolton and Gregor Clegane. I simply cannot force myself to choose. Both men feel distinctly worse than the rest, and neither has a single redemptive moment. The only other character who steps close to their collective shadow of wretchedness is Cersei Lannister. However, my answer is not the right answer. It is just my opinion. Did I miss any characters who should be nominated as the worst of the worst? Let's start a discussion below. So, that's all for this video. Leave a comment with your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new here. I'd love to have you. Visit my website, russellawellsauthor.com, for exclusive reviews, fiction, and more. And sign up for my mailing list for free exclusive content. The links for both are in the description below. And, like always, I will see you next time.